welcome back to another episode of Ask SplitSuit a Question. I'm James SplitSuit Sweeney here for thepokerbank.com, and today we're going to answer one of your questions. So today's question comes from Saki G, and they say, I'm new to online poker and really confused between choosing a 6-max or a full-ring table. What are the pros and cons of each? And what would you suggest for a beginner player? So this is a great question, and one of those questions that every single online player is going to have to answer for themselves at one point or another. So for those of you that aren't really fully aware of it, a full ring table is a table that seats either 9 or 10 players, and a 6-max table seats at maximum 6, so usually somewhere between 3 to 6 players will be at that table at any given time. So as far as which one you want to play, it's definitely going to be a personal decision, and you'll find out later on that your own strengths as a player, strategically speaking, will also help influence which way you decide to go. So as far as the cons and the pros of each, well, the pros of each is that if you're playing full ring, the games are inherently usually a little bit tighter. More players means that oftentimes players are going to be a little bit on the tighter side of the spectrum, which can be a good thing or a bad thing for you, depends on how you look at it. And obviously in a 6-max game, there are going to be fewer players. Now, when there are fewer players, it means that if there's a fish in the game, or maybe multiple fish in the game, it's much easier to get that fish. Whereas if you're playing in a full ring game, all of a sudden there's a lot more players contending for that same individual, and that's obviously going to create a little bit of a problem when it comes to who's going to get them first, especially if they're only going to buy in for one bullet. Definitely something that you want to be keeping in mind. The other thing is when you're playing 6-max games inherently are a little bit looser and a little bit more aggressive. Now, when you're first starting out, maybe that's not a good thing for you. Maybe you're not really sure how to 3-bet yet, you're not sure how to face 3-bets yet, you're not sure how to face extra double and triple barrels. What does that mean? Is that light? Is that heavy? What do I do with it? So there are a bunch of things to keep in mind. Full ring games tend to be a little bit more straightforward, a little bit less aggressive, and obviously that can be a nice transition getting used to playing online poker versus jumping right into a place where you're going to play looser, going to play more aggressive, and maybe you're not prepared for that yet. So which would I suggest for a beginner player? I'd usually suggest a beginner player start at full ring. Simply because in full ring games, you're inherently going to play a little bit tighter. Your opponents are going to play a little bit tighter as well. There's going to be less aggression, which means you're not going to have to face as many 3-bets or anything, which can be a lot more comfortable when you're first getting started and getting your footing in hold'em cash games as a whole. So I would usually suggest playing full ring to get started until you get comfortable, and then once you're comfortable, then I would start trying to make the transition over to 6-max games. Now again, 6-max games are more aggressive, players usually tend to be a little bit better, but there's a lot more upward mobility in 6-max. 6-max games you can play much higher up, you can play it into 600 no limit, 1000 no limit, etc. Full ring games online, especially, tend to die off, especially closer to like 200 no limit, 400 no limit. They kind of start really capping and fading off, whereas 6-max you're going to get a much higher potential, which is really important if you're thinking about, making this a full-time profession, is, thinking about upward mobility and where does my game cap out versus where does my game maybe not cap out, or not cap out so quickly anyway. So again, beginner players, I would suggest full ring. It's a little bit easier. It's easier to get started in terms of hand reading because, again, people play a little bit tighter, easier to get comfortable with it, and then you can just loosen up and extrapolate as you move into 6-max. I just think full ring is going to promote a lot of good fundamentals. It's going to promote you to play a little bit tighter, which is like the biggest transition going from being a new player to being someone who can win in this game, is learning how to get rid of junk, learning when to make folds pre-flop, that sort of thing. So I think if you play a little bit tighter in a full ring game, get used to it, eventually amp your game up to being maybe a lag at full ring, and then start transitioning over to 6-max, I think that's going to be a really comfortable path to walk. So Saki, thanks for the great question. Hopefully this gets you started when you're making your decision in the future. And if you or anyone else has a poker-related hand or question, feel free to leave it on our Google Plus page. Leave a link for that in the description box. And also please make sure to like and subscribe if you're enjoying this type of video. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to let me know. Otherwise, good luck out there and happy grinding.